everyone. Thanks for joining. We are going to get started. Just a couple of housekeeping items as we kick off here. We are recording the content. We'll post to the New Signature social media channels, and we'll send out a link to everyone who registered after the fact. It'll also be available on the New Signature event site in about 24 hours. I do have the audience muted, but meeting instant messages turned on. If you have a question, we encourage you to type it into the chat window. I'll be monitoring that as we go through and interrupting Michael if something pops up. So happy to answer questions. We definitely encourage you to ask those in the chat window if you have something specific or something more general that you would like to get a little bit more information on. I wanted to introduce Michael Trachtenberg, who is going to kick us off here, and I will turn it over to you.
Hey, good morning. Thanks, Christine, and thanks everyone for joining. Nice to talk to you all today. Like Christine mentioned, my name is Mike Trachtenberg. I'm a solutions architect for New Signature, and I'll be walking you through mobile device management and Microsoft's many different strategies and offerings around it, and kind of talk to you a little bit about today about how devices can be managed, how they could be managed, what you should be looking out for, and what you should be avoiding, and also going over the products across the Microsoft suite that kind of support your policies or the policies you've yet to develop. So happy to kick this off. If there's anything else, Christine, we can just dive in at this point. So. All right, I guess we'll go ahead um, and I guess we'll get started. So starting off with mobile device management, right? So when we first hear mobile device management, first talking about MDM, obviously this is not a new concept anymore, right? This is something that's been around for a little bit, and it's something we're either dealing with on a day-to-day basis or starting to wrestle with in some regard, and it could be everything from how do we manage the devices that are coming into our network, how do we manage people accessing our corporate data on their personal devices, how do we control the data, how do we control the devices, how do we control who's connecting, right? Mobile devices can be anything from a laptop, it can be obviously a phone or a tablet, or people putting corporate data on smartwatches, and it could even be a server, right? Because you could have these devices that are shipped from place to place, and in theory at that point they've become a mobile device, right? Just because you hear the term mobile device doesn't necessarily mean that it automatically has to be a phone or something of that nature. Right. So when we talk about the management of these mobile devices, what does that mean? What are we trying to do? Obviously, yes, we want to control basic items such as the the device itself, hardware pieces, or software that's on that device, or compliance settings on those devices, right? So we want to control those. We want to be able to turn off or on features. We want to be able to update them, patch them, and make sure that they're compliant. We want to inventory those items, right? Making sure that we're getting a good idea of what it is that we have ownership of, and a good idea of what's connecting into our systems, right? And then once we get beyond just that initial layer of just identifying what all of that stuff is, we want to then start to enhance capabilities. We want to enhance the user experience. We want to make sure that we're then providing services as part of management, right? Things like the same thing that we've been doing on-prem for a long number of years, offering up applications, providing self-service, providing added layers of security for users to be able to access things, right? So all of that is it need to be considered in strategies around MDM, right? So the for mobile device management, and where that uh, Microsoft is aligning itself for is having one vision for this, whether it is a mobile device or whether it is on prem, and whether it's a service that they're using for their desktops while they're in the office, or it's access to that same service or application or information from remotely, right? All of that should not matter. We should have one set of tools to be able to manage all of those things in one method and one function, right? So all Microsoft strategies are very cloud focused, cloud driven. Everything that's new that's coming out has the cloud in mind, so that we can start to blur the lines between mobile devices and on-premise devices, and it just becomes one layer of management, right? Now, that might seem like a scary thought where, everything is being, can be considered a mobile devices, but if you're not there yet, I mean, it's rapidly approaching, right? So we need to have one set of tools or one set of strategy for managing all of those things. All right. So why, right? Why is this happening? Why is it important? Well, it's obviously the increase in people working from more devices, from more places, with greater access to corporate data off of all of those different locations, right? So you have people that have more than 3 devices. Everyone has an iPhone or Android phone, a tablet, a laptop, all these different things that they're connecting to work resources from. Um, and really, people want to be more mobile. They want to work from more locations, and they want to be able to be productive while they're on the go, right? Aside from just the devices, people also need more applications to perform their work, right? Sometimes those applications, and sometimes you don't, right? Sometimes users are using some application that they either personally own or free downloaded, and they're using corporate data against those free applications, and that could be a scary thought also, but it makes sense, right? Someone is trying to get some work done, so they're going to use the path of least resistance in order to execute what it is that they're trying to finish, right? So from a management standpoint, a security standpoint, we start to think of, well, how do we rein that in? How do we make sure that we know what people are connecting from, what they're connecting with, making sure that the data is not transferring over into those environments as well, right? Um, so the driving forces for those things are, yes, part on people trying to be productive, but it's also from executives in organizations. They want people to have that flexibility, and they want them to be productive, right? So one of the obviously there's a lot of stats and on this slide, and information around the way that executives are start thinking, but a lot of it is their top priority is enhancing the customer experience, right? And that customer can be, a worker who's just trying to get their work done remotely. It can be someone who's about to, get on a plane and needs access to some information before they do it. It can be, something that it is consumer facing, right? So everyone wants to enhance that customer experience, and a lot of times enhancing that customer experience is allowing people to work flexibly and the way in which they want to work. And obviously giving the IT the tools to manage that. All right. So when we talk about the complexities of a good mobile device strategy, it all stems from the idea of having a user connecting to these mobile devices, which connect to multiple applications that have different data streams that it needs to attach to. So each that can be a very, very complex, tree branch of management if we try to map out, all the different ways in which we needed to secure and manage those things. So that obviously produces a tremendous amount of needs for the IT management organization. Obviously centered around identity, the devices, securing those applications, and making sure that the data is accessed securely and is secured even after it is being accessed, and making sure that we're executing good data loss prevention strategies or DLP strategies. Right, so these, when it comes to the needs of the IT individual, they're definitely many, and they need to be executed with solutions that are easily implemented, easy to maintain, and easy to use. Right, because if we had any number of IT management solutions to try to fit into all of these different scenarios, it can become quite cumbersome. So the idea behind Microsoft strategy is to kind of use a three-prong approach to securing your environment around MDM policies and to give IT the needs that they want while offering up that enhanced experience for the end user. So Microsoft has broken that up into three parts, which is the identity management, the device management, and the data management, right? And then having those three components working together, you can build a comprehensive um, a comprehensive MDM strategy for your organization. So Microsoft bundled three products into a suite of products, the EMS suite. This suite of products encompasses utilizing those three pillars, right? So identity, mobile device, and information management. The identity part is all centered around Azure Active Directory Premium. That's the specific product. Mobile devices around Windows Intune and access to information protections under rights management. So what we're going to do a little bit today is we're going to talk about each one of those individually. We'll talk about also another component of EMS, which is the advanced threat analysis for antivirus. It's kind of like looking at the behavioral analytics of your environment and ensuring that your environment is secured and it is constantly being watched and monitored for behavioral analysis to identify any threats that might have gotten into your network that have kind of gotten past these three first main pillars. So we'll start off with the identity portion. So this is how identity can be used to identify to securely have access for users to connect to resources in your environment and making sure that users are who they say they are. So, for the hybrid identity, so the idea behind this is that a user's identity will travel with them and extends beyond just your borders. Why this is important inside of an MDM strategy is that your user's identity can be the main vessel for what they use to connect to resources once they're outside of your environment. This is all facilitated through cloud services, obviously. So a user can start to access corporate resources from outside of the network, but they have to authenticate using their same on-premise, the same username and password that they use when they log into their machines, right? So they have one common username and password, one common set of credentials. It's something that's familiar to them. They're able to access their resources using that same common username and password. So this is great for IT with regards to management because it's one set of credentials that they have to manage. It's great for the user because it's one set of credentials that they have to manage. Also, from a reporting/access standpoint, it makes a lot of sense because you know who's going to be connecting to what resources and when, and all of those things are reportable, right? So the idea of building a hybrid identity set, right? So basically having users that are based out of your on-premise, Active Directory structure that are synced to the cloud, that then they access all of their cloud-based information or all remote information using the same credentials, the same username and password. So it builds a great experience for the IT management and the end users. What the different services that are capable with that, or once you start to go to this hybrid identity standpoint, is you can start to implement obviously access to information, right, with that common identity. So people, when they're going to, a practical example, log into, either Office 365 resources, Office Mail from remotely, when they go to log into OneDrive or, some other shared file share from a mobile app, they're going to be using their same username and password, and it's going to authenticate to cloud services, and they're going to be able to gain access to those things, right? And the same inversely goes if you wanted to lock someone out of something, either because their account has been compromised, or they're leaving the company, or they're changing a role or position, and they're going to need a different level of access. Well, you make those changes on-prem, it trickles up into your on-prem your cloud services, and then regardless of where they are, it is going to change their access and permissions at that time. So that's just from a management standpoint, that's obviously pretty powerful. But from an enhanced capability standpoint, after that point, there are tons of more options you have now. Some of the basic ones are something like multi-factor authentication, right? So if a user is going to try to access some corporate resources from outside your network, you can have it so that they can have to do verify on their phone with a PIN number, or have a token that's sent to them, or they get a text message, or have to verify through some other application to identify their to confirm their identity. All right, so that's all under MFA. MFA has been around for a while. MFA is included in this hybrid identity scenario, and you can even extend that to your on-premise applications as well. Aside from just that, you can also then have a lot more self-service with your users. And once they've been enabled and been synchronized to the cloud, you can perform all types of self-service for them. So users can go to websites to reset their passwords, and then that password can even write back to the on-premise Active Directory and reset their on-premise Active Directory. So if we're looking at the scenario of a user's locked themselves out of their machine because either their password has expired or they forgot it, or whatever the case is, they can now go to another website and they could recover their password themselves without having to call or contact IT or have any type of interaction with them. This is the same types of services that a lot of other, it's like if for your bank website, or your email website, or any other website that you use on a personal level, typically if you forgot your password, you can go through a password reset process that is something that you initiate and you go through on your own. That process can now become the same way for your Microsoft accounts and your Active Directory for your on-premise environment. So aside from just the password capabilities, you can also do this for a ton of other areas. You can do it for access to applications. If someone wants to have access to an application, they can have a self-service workflow for that. If someone wants to have access to certain group-based membership for applications or file shares, or really any other resource in your network that is permissions-based, you can have them request access through a workflow, and it becomes more of a self-service type process. Also for around the idea of enhancing the user experience and making it easy again for IT to manage these things, one of the other components, and when we're talking about a larger MDM strategy, is also managing the access to applications that people have, right? So you might use in your environment Salesforce and Workday and Concur and all these other SaaS apps that users have to manage and maintain their credentials for. Well, the hybrid identity approach allows you to be able to manage those applications as well, and give the user either the same username and password experience again for those, or even take that away and abstract the idea of them actually logging into all these other services. You could have all of their applications served up to them in one portal, which they can click right into and gain instant access to. And on the back end, it's just using their same username and password for those things. That single sign-on experience for all of those other applications that you're using, typically that's something that's has been around for a while, but it's a heavy configuration. You need all these servers and things like that. Well, now it's just a web service that Microsoft manages and maintains. So they maintain the connections to those other SaaS applications, all those other web-based applications. And your users can just click right through in the portal to get to them, and IT can configure them automatically by using the already established Microsoft connectors for those things. So definitely a great amount of enhanced capability around that, and the ability to provide those applications to your end users. Now, those applications can also be served through self-service, right? So if you have, these 30 different web-based applications that are affiliated with your organization, and a user wants to gain self-service to them, they can, right? They could go and request access to those applications. The applications can even have application owners, and they can approve or deny access to applications, right? Again, taking all of the onus away from IT so that they don't have to basically manage all of that and put people in groups and so on. All of that process can be automated through these services for the hybrid identity. All right, so that kind of encompasses the first pillar, which is the identity portion. And there's a ton more features in there. There's reporting on who's using which applications. This way you can better align your licensing to your usage. There's security-based reports for things that might seem suspicious, such as a user logging in from one location at 8:03 and then a location 3,000 miles away at 8:04, right? Which is obviously looks to be suspicious and would give you information for combating some type of malicious attack or something like that, right? So you have lots of other additional features, obviously, to the ability to control how people reset their passwords, how people use self-service, and if you want to use that at all. All right, so moving to the next section. So once we get the identity portion, where you have a hybrid identity, people are able to access their applications and everything from different locations, and they're using self-service, as new and enhanced capabilities. Well, now we want to control the devices that they're connecting from, right? So we're making sure that we're securing the identity, and now we're going to secure the device itself and manage the device itself, right? So when we talk about mobile device management, really it's in the Microsoft world, it's Microsoft Intune. That's the product that it performs the mobile device management, right? And all that is doing is giving you means to control the types of devices, the compliance settings on the devices, the security of a device that is connecting to your environment, right? So you can do obvious things like control hardware functionality, control updates, control pins and passwords. When I say control hardware capabilities, I mean you can turn off roaming, you can shut off the camera, you can do on or off for a number of other features like that. You can have the devices make sure they have a password or a pin or are encrypted and things like that. So those are all very basic controls over those types of devices. What are more advanced strategies or more advanced policies for MDM is making sure that devices that are connecting to your resources are the devices you want, and that they're the devices that are have been identified with one of your hybrid identities, right? So how do we go about that? The first way is a feature called conditional access. So conditional access pretty much just states that a device that is going to connect to your corporate resources is going to be enrolled in your mobile device solution. So to kind of give you a for instance for that is, let's say I have my iPhone and I want to use my iPhone to attach, to get my email on it. It's my personal iPhone. I want to, I go to the email app and I go to attach my email, my work email to it. So once I go to attach my work email to it, before I'm able to actually do that, it is going to check my device. The Intune service is going to check my device, see if it meets my company's policies for compliance, saying it must have a PIN, it must be encrypted, and it has to be running, the software version not 8 or newer. It's going to check those things, and it's going to tell me, like, oh, your device is not compliant. It must have these things before you can get email on your phone. Okay, so I can make sure I put those things in place, and then it says, okay, well, I also must enroll my device into the mobile device management solution before it will also get the email on the phone. So I'll enroll my device. During the enrollment process, it's going to verify my identity with my hybrid identity. It's going to put me through multi-factor authentication, right? It's going to either call me or text me. Could be that phone, could be on a different phone. And once I've identified my identity, then it's going to enroll the device, and then it's going to start to allow me to get email on my phone, right? So that's great. That's great from an IT management standpoint, because you know that people are connecting with devices that meet your criteria, and they're verifying their identity during the process of getting their email onto that device. Once we've enrolled a device and I'm using it and I got my email, okay, that's great. So where the added or enhanced functionality then comes after that, from the end user perspective, is now we have a company portal. The company portal can have all my corporate applications listed out there. Obviously, there's email management from for the IT manager's standpoint. Um, the the applications in my company portal can be presented to me, and I can say, okay, and I can go download Word and Excel and all these other applications that I need to do my job, and they're all in one stop shop. Now, these things, I'm using iPhone as an example, but it's not limited to just iPhones, right? You can do this for Android devices. You can do this for Windows laptops, right? So for all of your people who are working remotely with laptops, and maybe they have their own laptops, maybe they're consultants, maybe they're contractors. This type of workflow can work for their full-blown desktops as well. Um, so it's not limited to just the mobile phones. So again, when we're talking about mobile devices, it can be almost any type of mobile device. Once we have our our corporate data on those devices, we can do a lot from an IT management standpoint, where we can encrypt that corporate data. We can containerize it. We can make it so that corporate data can only be accessed or managed through specific corporate owned applications as well. Right, so you can have managed applications where users can have access to their data and only from there. And then, if one of the big things with MDM and people attaching corporate email to their personal devices as well. How do we separate the personal and the business owned data and applications? Well, you can do that with this system. You can have the corporate owned applications and data are completely containerized and separate. So they have their own little silo, so to speak, and the personal data is totally segregated. This way, if either the person leaves, or they their device falls out of compliancy, or they did something and their device is no longer compliant with corporate standards, and or they lost it, right? And you wanted to remotely wipe that device, you're able to remotely wipe just the corporate containerized data from that device. Um, so that's definitely a much better approach, as to the opposed to the wiping the device entirely. All right. So there's a ton of other features that are available with the mobile device management platform. If you're looking at managing mobile devices that are desktops, you have the ability to control Windows updates, to control the antivirus and the scheduling of scans and things of that nature. There's inventories. There's full application management. If you want to deploy EXEs or MSIs to those full-blown desktops, you can do that as well. Providing remote assistance and a whole host of other features. So with regards to PC management, there's you can do a lot of the same things that you're already doing to manage PCs in the environment, all remotely and as just as if it was a mobile device. All right, so the last component from the three main pillars um, of the EMS suite, which is all centered around MDM, is rights management, or access and information protection. So rights management is a mechanism for securing the data itself, right? So this is going to encrypt data on the content level, so that that data is protected, and users have to verify their identity and their device, if you wish, so that to get access to the individual piece of content, we are making sure that that it is secured and the correct people are accessing it. So this is all based under Azure Rights Management Services. So if we take some examples, or for instance, for this is the idea. We'll start with a simple one such as email. So for email, you can have if I was to send Christine an email, and I wanted so that she can't forward it to anyone else, or she can't copy it to another location, or um, she can't edit the contents of that particular email. So RMS gives me the ability to encrypt that email so that I can put also levels of permissions on that email that I want to designate only for Christine. So I can say only Christine can only view this. She can't print it. She can't print screen. She can't share it with anyone else. I can apply that on the fly for any particular email, or I can do it in large batches and via templates as well. So when I send her that email, she's going to receive it. She's going to see that she only has limited permissions for that particular email, and she's not going to be able to perform any action that I didn't want her to do so with that. So that's really great for email, and where this type of strategy for RMS fits into a larger MDM policy is really with your content, right? Your file type content. So if we take the Word files, for example, or Excel files, maybe that have some sensitive data in it, you can apply these same templates and these permissions to the Excel files or the Word documents, and then we'll say a user go ahead and they take a Word document and they email it outside of they email it to their Gmail account, and then they go ahead and they copy it down to their home PC and they try to access it from there. All right. So when we're talking about mobile device management, that's a huge concern, right? People are using personal devices. They could be copying corporate data onto their personal devices and transferring them to other devices. Well, RMS will basically give you the ability to encrypt that content, and if they go through that process of emailing it to their Gmail and then copying it down to a personal device or whatever, the content itself is still encrypted, right? So when they try to open that piece of content from home on their personal device, the content itself is going to ask them to authenticate using that same hybrid identity that we spoke about before. So they'll be asked to put in their username and password, right? And that should be the same one that you've been using, for accessing all the other corporate resources. It'll go through the same multi-factor authentication process as well if you want it to. Once it does, it's going to check in with the cloud services, make sure that they are who they say they are, and once the authentication process happens, they then get access to that piece of content. Right? And that's all pretty powerful stuff, because now even if people are using personal devices and personal resources and they're trying to access this content from remotely, or they somehow got it outside of your walls, then the content itself is still protected and it's still going to validate their credentials. Also important, because if they decide, if as administrator you disabled their account, or you or they left the company, or you just don't want to provide access to that information outside of your walls, you can block all of those things. You can disable that account, and then when they go to try to open that piece of content, they're not going to be able to get in. You can also block all access from outside external address ranges, right? So this way, if they're trying to access that content from outside your walls, it's just not going to work, right? So that's all very, very powerful stuff. So these permissions also are very useful for sharing content with people outside your organization, right? So if you did want to share information with some people and you want it to be in a controlled manner, you can use these permissions. You can do it so that they can't edit the documents you send them, and they have to verify their identity in order to access the specific piece of content. With that, you can also track their access to it. You can see who's accessing a particular Word file and when, and it has a tracker for you to say, oh, okay, this person is accessing the content at this time or that time. You can see who they forwarded to, and get a map of where your content is traveling outside of your borders. Also, you can have notifications in that process. See if someone who's trying to access your content that wasn't authorized to do so. And you can even revoke access to content or time bomb content, so that you can say the content is not accessible after 7 or 14 days of someone receiving it. So definitely a lot of a lot of great advanced features that you can take advantage of by applying this content level encryption. All right. So now that is definitely helpful for data loss prevention or information leaving your environment that you want to protect and encrypt. And there's lots of automated ways to do that too. So you can have it so that the user or someone is just initiating, right? So they can open up a Word file and they can apply those permissions to say, okay, only this person can edit it. They can only edit it for 7 days and send it out. Or you can have it so that it's a little bit more of an automated process and have that tied into your on-premise resources. So you can do things that say like, oh, all of the content in this particular file share is protected with these permissions. Everything that's sent with the word confidential in the subject line is sent with these permissions, or everything in this SharePoint library has these particular permissions applied to them. So there are automated ways to do it, and there are user initiated ways, right? So that means like I initiated it, I put the permissions on there. So you do have a bunch of control and flexibility in that regard. All right, so the next area is advanced threat management. So this is the kind of like the last component of this whole suite. And when we talked about mobile device management and our strategy around controlling the identity, the device, and the content, well, you can see that's a pretty holistic approach to securing your data and managing devices and managing information in your environment. That's outside your environment also trying to get in. And where the advanced threat management comes in is, well, at the point in which those things are trying to get into your environment and even afterwards, what if you did have either some security breach either prior to that, or something else did happen that got around some of your many security protocols. So what's known as ATA, Advanced Threat Analysis, is a product to help with all of that, and is included in the same suite of products as well. When we talk about cybersecurity, right? I mean, it's very rare that a month will go by without noticing some big news that some major organization has gotten hacked, costing the global economy $500 billion, which is a ridiculous amount of money, right? So when we're looking at there's tons of statistics that you can look at, that show how important proper security is, and how a lot of these things can be prevented. Honestly, a lot of the major security breaches could have been prevented with a lot of the features we're talking about here today: conditional access, mobile device management, multi-factor authentication. Typically, multi-factor authentication is a number one technology that could have prevented most of the major security breaches in the last year, right? But once something does happen, right, it's a matter of identifying that quickly, right? So the biggest one of the biggest statistics that I find interesting is that a lot of times it takes on average more than 200 days to identify an attack has happened, and that's why a lot of the big profile breaches, like why these organizations are getting 100 million people's credit card numbers, or these large data dumps of information, is because those attacks, once they've happened, they go on for long periods of time without being noticed, and the average is somewhere around 200 days. So we're talking definitely more than half a year. All right. So the other one is 75% of all network intrusions are traced back to compromised credentials, right? So that's where MFA could have solved almost all of the other major breaches that you've heard about. Compromised credentials are nothing if you don't have MFA in place, right? So if someone got your password but they still don't have the other forms of authentication, multi-factor authentication would prevent against those things. All right. So advanced threat analysis is a series of services that are running in your environment that use behavioral analysis to identify if a threat has taken place on-prem. This is a very, very robust system that will take a look at just about all traffic and everything else that's going on in an environment and identify if some type of malicious threat seems to be in place. So And this is going to be looking at your, looking at Active Directory, looking at, people's logons, looking at, the behavioral analysis of people, right? To see, how people are using different systems in your environment, connecting into your environment, and also, using resources while they're in there. And if anything seems to be out of place, it is going to then, you know, bring that to the attention of the correct individuals. So this is definitely an on-premise situation, set of tools that is used for basically analyzing every single thing that's going on in your environment. So while it's doing its analysis, it's looking for all different types of things. Obviously, again, behavioral things of how users are using the system, but then also automated things that are taking place on the network. So if it sees services that seem malicious or seem to be doing something in the back end that have not been properly invoked or initiated, well, it's going to be able to identify those and see if it's running something that it doesn't have permission. Um, so uh, when it's doing this analysis, it's looking for obviously malicious attacks and abnormal behavior and anything else that would seem to be an alert that an attack has typically taken place. So this definitely a worthwhile tool for identifying attacks as they get initiated, but also it kind of prevents away from that whole 200-day plus scenario where there's been some breach a while ago and it just hasn't been detected yet. Because most organizations, they spend a lot of time protecting against the perimeter, right, which is what the rest of the mobile device management components we were talking about earlier. But once you get past the perimeter and things are internal, there's typically a lot less monitoring and notifying. Um, where this differs from just a typical antivirus, right? So if we talk about like the technology of antivirus and how that works, right? We all have antivirus on our machines, right? You can manage those antivirus with MDM, so even like your remote or your mobile devices are protected with antivirus. All antivirus does, and this is how they all work, is it has a set of um, known threats, right? So it says, these particular files are bad, these services are bad, these, email addresses are bad. It has a set of known definitions, and it can identify all of those as being malicious. All the antivirus does is it checks everything on that system and compares it against the known threats. And if it, identifies that there is a known threat in there, it raises a red flag for you to, remove the threat either by quarantine or deletion or whatever the case might be for your organization. Right, so it's just a check, a comparison. What advanced threat analysis does is obviously it looks for the changes in things, right? It looks for items running that shouldn't be running, or at a certain time, or hey, wait, no one started that particular service, or no one started that particular item. So that's so behavioral analysis is very different than someone checking against whether or not this should be present or not. This is, oh, should it be present? Who started it? Why is it still running? If it is running, was it initiated the proper way? It's running for too long. This, no one has ever started it in this fashion before. This is a red flag. So that's the kind of the major difference if we're talking about like what is an antivirus versus advanced threat analysis. So obviously the benefits, I think we've definitely talked a lot about this already, but the big thing is being able to detect these suspicious activities based off of more than just a set of series of definitions, right? And then this is what's going to lead you to not having to wait so long, or not having that um, the 200 days before you identify there's a threat in your environment, because also you're in that case you're only as good as the definitions, right? So if your definitions are not updated, or someone creates a malicious attack and they send it out like that day, you're not going to have that in your definitions yet. But behavioral type tracking is going to be able to identify and find that and be able to give you a course for identifying it much faster, because it's not based just off a set of definitions. All right. so it's able to adapt and change in that fashion. It's also able to adapt and change to your particular, organization. So you're going to be able to uh, be a little bit more nimble because your advanced threat analysis is going to see how your organization works. It's going to say, all right, we have influx of people working at this times, these, or when more mobile devices are connecting into our environment. This is when we have more of a server maintenance, and it's going to know all of those things and then make logical assessments based upon the behavior of your specific organization. Right? False positives, right? So that is definitely an issue where there's either too many false positives, right, and people are then become unable to check through all of them, and then that could, in theory, allow some malicious threats to squeak by because either they didn't get to it yet, or they dismiss it as something that's not an actual problem. And that does happen. And part of it is fatigue, and part of it is just not enough education to know that particular thing was a some type of malicious threat. So false positives are very much an important issue and an area of concern, and definitely something that this will help because it will help weed through all of those different items that probably aren't malicious, but are still being perceived as so. All right, and so with advanced threat analysis, that's the last component of the EMS suite, and the last component of Microsoft's overall arching strategy around mobile devices. So that's securing your on-premise environment, and once machines are connecting in, making sure that they're not bringing anything with it, and if they are, identifying those threats quickly through behavioral analysis, right? And the other three components, just to recap quickly, the Azure Active Directory, which is your hybrid identity that gives you the ability to manage and maintain a cloud-based hybrid identity persona, so that people can use that for authenticating themselves as well as getting access to self-service and a number of other hosted applications and services for individuals. You have Intune with that's your device-based mobile device management, so controlling the devices, providing conditional access, making sure the devices are up to date, inventories, and so on. And then the rights management service, which is securing the data, encrypting data, giving permissions to specific pieces of content, and having that encryption and those pieces move with the content wherever it might go. All right, so now we're at just about 11:50, so I think it's a pretty good time to see if there's any Q&A at this point. So I'll leave the last few minutes for questions.
If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat window, or you can unmute. Michael, I'm wondering, you've done quite a few of these migrations. Are there pitfalls that you've seen people stumble over regularly?
Yeah, it kind of depends in like where they want to start. If and also I guess that is sometimes a pitfall. Sometimes there's a lot here, right? So then organizations say, well, where do I start, right? There's obviously a lot, and sometimes they get wrapped up in, should we start with the mobile devices? Should we start with the content? And really the best area to start off with is the identity. Securing that identity and making sure that regardless of where you go next, those particular people are who they say they are, and from there the rest can kind of flow. So I would say the biggest area of concern with just getting started is and with the initial pitfalls is just making sure you start in the right spot, and it's almost always the hybrid identity component.
I also wanted to mention that Ruth Ann Farrell, who is a Microsoft sales specialist, is on the line. If there are specific questions about licensing or transacting an EMS purchase, Ruth Ann would be happy to answer those as well. We could follow up in an email if individual attention is required. But Ruth Ann, did you want to add anything? I know it's been an action-packed 45 minutes, but anything we missed? Oh, you're muted. It appears Ruth Ann cannot come off of mute, so we will follow up in an email. Michael, it doesn't look like we have any questions, so I think we should stop the